From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. It's Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Do not forget the juniors. Very important to remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, and review. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. Also, once again, hi to the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Glad you have found us here. All right, it is Wednesday here in the city of New Orleans. A beautiful day, a little chilly this morning, but it is a gorgeous day outside right now. So I hope you're enjoying this beautiful hump day in the city because we are working our way through this week. And look, as we work our way through this week, we're going to get closer and closer to the NFL draft, which is about 2 weeks away, little 2 weeks and a day, depending on when you watch this, toward the start of the NFL draft. And that's obviously what we are going to focus on. But there are other topics as well. Before we get to that, how are you feeling on this Wednesday?
I'm feeling good. You know, I got the duo, the haircut, and you know you can't get a haircut without getting a burger. So I got the haircut burger combo today. I'm feeling energized. Good to go.
All right. I did see the fresh kind of lineup right there. I got my haircut too a couple days ago on Saturday.
Did you get a burger though?
I did not. I ended up cooking that night. So I was what did we eat that night?
Responsible.
Yeah, I did the responsible thing. So it was all good though. Tasted really good. So all right, here we go. Wednesday, like we said. So you know, you kind of you do your best to navigate these topics and this content. And where you're at right now is, I mean, the momentum is everything is all full swing when it comes to the draft. But then it really hits this little path right here where it just feels like, all right, when's it going to get here? Because we have talked about a lot of different topics when it comes to the draft, and we will continue to do so. But there's still 2 more weeks to go. Luckily today for us, or this morning, arguably the most popular Saint on the team, the longest tenured Saint on the team, being Cam Jordan, was on the NFL Network talking about your New Orleans Saints. So we're going to get into that with the big picture here today.
Right, Cam Jordan talking about his team, and he's really one of the more compelling guys in the league. I'm sure when his career is over, he's going to make that move to the TV side because he's got a lot of talent there. So as he sat on NFL Network, he talked about a bevy of things, you know, relating to the Saints, starting with their health, the new head coach. He talked about the NFC South. He even talked about what their potential draft plans would be. But instead of hearing it from us, we want you to hear it from the man itself, starting with what he said the team could have done last season if they were healthy.
I think we have a team where, when healthy, top tier. Last year, went 2-0. You saw a healthy Rashid Shaheed. You saw Chris Olave, a healthy offensive line. You saw a team that was determined, young guys coming off the edge, Chase Young, Carl Granderson. You have Brian Brzee, you know, splashing this year. And then, that was sort of after 2 games, that was about the last time you saw us all healthy. You know, then next thing you know, injury bug happens. I'm not sure. We were facing the next man up every week, including at our quarterback position, which is probably the most important position for our offense. Quarterback dishes the ball out. Next thing you know, we're inserting Spencer Rattler. We're inserting Jake Haener back to Spencer Rattler to Derek Carr. And so give me a healthy Derek Carr, and I can tell you where a healthy Saints state of mind will be. If he's healthy all 17 games, cool. Phenomenal for us. Rashid Shaheed is healthy, great. Chris Olave healthy, we extend Juwan Johnson. Shout out to my dog, Juwan Johnson. He's definitely a problem to be had at tight end. There's things that we can do. Taysom Hill's coming back, I believe. I mean, there's a place where we can still be happy.
So there you heard it. Cam being Cam. Cam Jordan, optimistic. Water is wet. Sky is blue. Cam is optimistic. That's what he does. He always is. He always will be. And why shouldn't he be? Especially, this year. First off, just as a natural person or natural athlete, you never want to go into a season thinking, I'm going to lose this year. And just in life, I've never understood those people that wake up every day and just feel or expect the worst. It's just a horrible way to go through life. But also in Cam, this is a very special situation. Very unique situation for him because it could be the last situation for him. This is year number 15 for Cam, and like I said, it could very well be his last season, not just here, but also in the NFL. He knows that. He understands that. He wouldn't have taken a pay cut or an adjustment to his salary had he not known that, or had he not understood that. What good would it do for him and potentially could be his last season, to be down about it before it even begins. Plus, it's the offseason. Everybody should be optimistic this time of year. Let the fans worry about the fan stuff. Let the coaches and front office worry about acquiring talent. But the players, I mean, it's a fresh start for everybody. But even with that, Cam being Cam, it's not entirely him drinking the Kool-Aid. It's a little bit of that, drinking the Kool-Aid, the black and gold Kool-Aid, if you will. But don't get me wrong. That's a little bit of it. But there are some indisputable facts that he talked about right there. And to what he was saying, I mean, the Saints were the talk of the NFL for the first 2 weeks of the season. The organization has really leaned in on that throughout the rest of the season, into the offseason, and different moves that they have made. Then obviously the injuries began and did not stop. A lot can be attributed to the injuries. Some are not. It's not fair to attribute to the injuries. So I do think it's what's become the talking point, or the rationale for moves they made based off last season was injuries. And to this point, Cam Jordan's message right there is very much in line with the entire Saints organization's message this offseason. Not by what they've said, but by what they have done. The Saints did not make wholesale changes, as we know. They didn't make wholesale changes to this roster. Small tweaks, mostly the same guys of a team that went 5-12 last season. To them, better health and better coaching will equal better results. Final point. You heard the whole thing there. I'm curious what you think about this. He brought up Derek Carr. Mm-hmm. Okay. So while we have not heard from Derek Carr, I did see he posted a story. I think he's with his family in Italy right now.
Good for him, you know.
We've now heard from Kellen Moore.
Yep.
Somewhat brief, but still acknowledged Derek Carr. Brandon Cooks. And now Cam have all talked about Derek Carr in a positive fashion. In Cam's case, he's always spoke highly of Derek Carr. Demario Davis has always spoken highly of Derek Carr. Taysom Hill has always spoken highly of Derek Carr. What I'm getting at are the seasoned vets who I just mentioned. Demario, Taysom, Cam.
Right.
Guys that could all be on their last seasons here in New Orleans. They understand that Carr obviously gives him the best chance to win since he's been here in New Orleans. I don't think that's hard to figure out. I think they truly understand that. And I'm starting to pick up on a theme here with Carr, and I've touched on it before, but I'm more confident in saying this now, just based off of what you hear from players and coaches versus what you hear from the people that talk to us about Derek Carr. Perfect example of a player whose respect inside the locker room feels like is up here, but the popularity in the fan base is down here.
Underground.
And that disparity, to me, respect to lack of popularity, some would call it even hatred, that's as big of a disparity of a Saint, because I've seen Saints players get hated before, but that's about as big of a disparity of a Saints player that I've ever covered, and I've been covering the team for a long time. Real quick, though, he said this. Derek Carr. Give me Derek Carr for 17 games, a healthy Derek Carr for 17 games. So let's play that game from last year. All other injuries, the exact same. We've done this before.
Yep.
But Derek Carr plays all 17 games. What's their record?
Maybe 7-10.
I got them 8-9.
8-9? Yeah, somewhere in that range. I still don't think that they're a top-tier team, as Cam said.
No, I think it would have leveled off because if you had all those injuries, but the only one that sticks around is Derek Carr, you're going to win more games than 5. But I'm willing to give him maybe 3 more games with Derek Carr. Fully healthy. Also, what was the little
you saw that
the
at the
little tidbit with Taysom Hill at the end there?
I believe.
We haven't heard much from Taysom, just in terms of what are his plans exactly.
Apparently, Cam hasn't either.
Yeah. So that's really what I thought about the kind of that. We're gonna have 3 different sort of clips from Cam Jordan, but that one right there, that's kind of what I make of that whole situation.
It's what he's supposed to think. You know, Saints fans, especially at this point, need a reason to be excited. I think Cam understands that. He has a good feel on the pulse of the city, the pulse of the organization, what these Saints fans need. So he has an opportunity to go on a national stage, which, by the way, a national stage that typically isn't talking about the Saints very often because they're not one of the more premier teams in the league. Nowadays, you see teams talking about the Saints as if they're going to draft Shedeur Sanders. That's really the only Saints, commentary out there right now. So Cam getting to shine a light on his team, on his city. Of course, he's going to do that in a positive light. I completely understand it. Now, when he says the phrase top tier when healthy, That's when I'm like, I don't know about top tier, because top tier teams make the playoffs. Top tier teams contend. I don't know, even off those first 2 weeks, if that's what the Saints would have done. I mean, they beat the stuffing out of the Panthers, who at the time were the worst team in the NFL by far. Bryce Young was about 2 weeks away from getting benched. Then they beat a Cowboys team that we find out later in the season was a bit overrated. So, when you say a top-tier team, to me a top-tier team is one that's able to pull it out consistently, not necessarily over the course of a few weeks, but over the course of a few years. They played a top-tier team in Week 5, the Kansas City Chiefs. Derek Carr played, Alvin Kamara played, Chris Olave played, Rashid Shaheed played, your defense was healthy, and that game was not even competitive. That's a top-tier team. Now, could the Saints have maybe been more competitive in the NFC South, a very winnable NFC South, which we'll get to in a minute? Yeah, I'm sure they could have been, but the Saints haven't been able to win consistently in a season for about 5 years.
Long time.
That's how long it's been since this was a top-tier team. So for me, I know those first 2 weeks of the season were fun. The Saints were the talk of the town, the talk of the NFL, leading the league in scoring. It was amazing to watch, amazing to be in the Dome Week 1 against the Carolina Panthers. But it's not a big enough sample size for me to say, even if they were healthy, this would have been a team that would have continued.
I agree. I mean, here's why. You mentioned the Kansas City game. That was the third of 3 straight losses, and Derek Carr obviously got injured. The Eagles game, they lost Eric McCoy early, and it really crushed them.
Top-tier team.
Team obviously won the Super Bowl, but that was one injury, and then so he was out for a couple of weeks, and that certainly hurt him. But it wasn't like an onslaught of injuries at that point. And then Week 4 against Atlanta, Taysom leaves in the second half, and you already missed Eric McCoy. So that's 2 key injuries, but it wasn't like the avalanche of injuries. It was kind of phased in when it came to injuries in terms. It wasn't just all at once, but they just kept coming and coming and coming. And those were winnable games that they didn't do. So while I understand why they lean on those first 2 weeks, they still had plenty of opportunities to win the next 3 weeks because they were still relatively healthy, at least healthy enough to compete in those games. And they competed, the Eagles and Falcons, obviously, but Chiefs dominated them. But they just couldn't get the job done. So I think that's fine for right now because that's kind of what you're rallying around. But I think the real picture is not quite as, that's the team we were the first 2 weeks, because that's not quite giving you the whole picture.
Exactly, because in the NFL, no team is 100% healthy over the course of a season. Every team has to deal with injuries as they compete to win a Super Bowl. So the Saints losing their center, the Saints losing Taysom Hill, those are injuries that are going to happen. Now, as the season goes on, you lose your Cesar Ruiz as well. You lose your quarterback in Derek Carr. You lose Olave. You lose Shaheed. You lose your backup offensive lineman.
By the time you got to midseason, that's when it really started to pick
That might
up.
have been the worst stretch of injuries I've ever seen in my life. But in those first 5 weeks, that first month or so of the season, the team was healthy enough to where if they were a top-tier team, you would have seen it for more than just 2 weeks. It wasn't a big enough sample size for me to say that they would have contended even if they were healthy.
Speaking of contending, this team, Cam Jordan, echoes what I've always kind of heard from the organization, just kind of felt from the organization, and that is they still think they can win the NFC South. Listen.
Yeah. I mean, this is a division that, let's be real. The Bucs have won the division the last 3 or 4 years. Yeah. So until you knock off the king of the hill, that's what you're doing. You're climbing the hill. But let's just not say they're running away with it. The last 3 years, I think, they clearly won this last, the NFC South this last year, 10-7. The year before that, 9-8. The year before that, 8-9. Come on, let's just say it's definitely attainable to go after.
All right, so what you just heard right there from Cam Jordan is the belief inside the organization. There is no doubt about it. But it goes a step further for me. The NFC South situation, to me, in my opinion, is the biggest reason why the Saints have not, quote unquote, pulled the plug or hit the reset button. They truly believe they are as good as any team in the NFC South, and that division is very attainable. Part of me thinks deep down, the organization understands they're not Super Bowl contenders, but in the meantime, they are NFC South contenders. And look, I think they're partially correct. I think, look, just look at the last 3 years, winning record against Carolina, winning record against Atlanta. The problem is the team that keeps winning, Tampa Bay, you're 1-5 the last 3 seasons against Tampa Bay. So there has to be an acknowledgement that while Tampa does not seem, like a team you can't overcome, they haven't done it. They haven't done it in 3 years. And I think you talk about, what they've done from a kind of run it back standpoint and, adding complementary pieces. I think what's going to get them over the top, if they truly want to do that, they got to hit a home run when it comes to the draft.
Yeah, I mean, to be contenders in the NFC South, you really just got to put your shoulder pads on and head out on the field. I mean, it's not very hard to contend in this division the way that it's been the last few years. And to speak to that point, I agree with Cam Jordan. The NFC South is and has been over the last 3 years a very winnable division. Tom Brady ain't in Tampa anymore.
Yeah.
The last 3 years, Tampa has won this division at 8-9, losing record, 9-8, 1 game away from a losing record, and last year I believe they were 10-7. I mean, they're not world beaters by any means, but while the window is open to be NFC South contenders, that window is closing, and it's closing fast because right now the team you're worried about is Tampa Bay. But look at the other 2 teams. The Carolina Panthers are one of the youngest teams in this league, and Bryce Young finally showed some competent quarterback play. And they have quietly improved this offseason. When you look at the offensive line that they really invested in last year, but they had the worst defense in the league. This offseason, they've invested heavily in the defense. You look at the Atlanta Falcons. They've got a nice roster.
They really do.
They've got a young quarterback in Michael Penix Jr. who was able to get in the last couple weeks of the season last year. And as Bryce Young continues to grow, as Michael Penix continues to grow, that's 2 young, talented quarterbacks that are going to look to slowly take this division over. And you've still got Baker Mayfield, who is playing the best football of his career. So while right now this is a very winnable division, it's been very winnable the last couple years, that may not last for more than 2 or 3 years because these other teams are coming.
And that's a good point because here's the thing. You just mentioned, but run back those records again, that won the division. 22, 23, and 24.
8-9 in 22, 9-8 in 23, last season 10-7, the Tampa Bay Bucks. The
Okay, so it's been very attainable these last 3 years. Last 3 years, and they've always felt like their core was good enough to win a division. Why haven't they done it the last 3 seasons? Why haven't they been able to do that? Why haven't they been able to get over that hump? It can't just be injuries. Last year, you can probably play that card a little more than, say, 2023, where they were relatively healthy. I know 2022, a little bit of a dicey year because, with the Jameis injury, and they turned to Andy Dalton, and I know there were a couple injuries, but all attainable, all very attainable the last 3 seasons. So, while you see the mountain when it comes to NFC South, and it doesn't look all that difficult, clearly, it's a little more difficult than they're given credit for because it's been attainable these last 3 seasons, and no one's been able to come to conquer the 8-9 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Right. So, to me, I understand the goal, and that's because if you win your division, you get to the playoffs, and at least for now, you host a playoff game. But the expectation's too low there because if you're reaching for those expectations and you've fallen short of those 3 years in a row, maybe it's time to expect a little more. That way you make a few more moves that could be a little more, I don't call it bolder or whatever, but that helps you get to a bigger goal. And while you're trying to shoot for the stars, you land in the NFC South Championship because it feels like the somewhat mediocre goal of winning the NFC South is kind of left in mediocre or in last year bad.
Yeah, and you can't keep blaming injuries because when you look around the league, a few years ago, a backup quarterback won the Super Bowl in Nick Foles. Just the season before last, Joe Flacco got up off the couch and led the Cleveland Browns, who we know are not a top-tier organization, to the playoffs. And it hasn't been that long since Lamar Jackson went down and Tyler Huntley came in and played Pro Bowl football for the Baltimore Ravens. So all around the league, you've got players that get injured, and they say next man up. But the thing about those teams, the next man can be up because they have depth. Yeah. The Saints are not a team with depth, and it showed last year when those injuries hit.
In one spot, they had to have depth, and sorry, fair or unfair, it wasn't good enough, was at the quarterback position, which obviously you have a young offensive guru as head coach, and he's a former quarterback, and the likelihood of the Saints drafting the quarterback, to me, is high at some point. However, If you ask Cam Jordan, the likelihood of them drafting in the first round is this.
They draft Shedeur Sanders. Okay. What would you think if they did?
The Saints haven't drafted a quarterback since Archie Manning in the first round. I don't.
Time for change.
I don't believe
What if they do?
Huh? Okay. Well,
right.
that's something that I'll approach. But what ifs? I'm just looking at history. What it doesn't do is repeat on the Saints side for drafting first round quarterbacks. So I've seen it as well. It's like, look at that, Shedeur Sanders. Look at that, Jackson Dart. Look at that. We could possibly. Okay. I've done that for too long.
All right, first off, how much did it hurt you to hear Cam say that? How much did it hurt you?
It was a shot to the chest because you know who I want. You know I'm printing the T-shirts of New Orleans, Louisiana.
I know he's your guy. I know it's not what Shedeur fans want to hear. I know it's not what Jackson Dart fans want to hear. And here's the thing, though, and I said this in the last pod. I think it matches the logical thinking. Not emotional, the logical thinking that the organization is probably going to have when this draft comes around. That's why I made sure to say in our last pod that while there is a lot of buzz with Shedeur, and I wouldn't have a problem if they selected him at 9, and he would bring a buzz, he would bring some box office, to some excitement to a fan base that's kind of dull. When the pick comes and Shedeur is available or there's other players available, I still think, as of right now, until I hear otherwise, they would pick someone other than Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, and you didn't hear it in that clip, but before that, Cam kind of joked about who he wants, and he's been very outspoken about that on social media. He wants Tedoroy McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona, and he mentioned Ashton Genty as well. A playmaker is essentially what he said he wants, and he kind of touched on the fact that, the Saints draft picks have kind of been underwhelming when you think about the exciting player because, you get juiced up every year. Like you said, you expect maybe quarterback, receiver, running back, and then you pick a lineman. And when you look back in the history of the Saints, that's pretty accurate. I looked all the way back to 2006 when the Saints drafted Reggie Bush. Since then, their first round picks, they've had 21 of them. 6 defensive linemen, 5 offensive linemen. That's over half right there, just in the trenches. 4 defensive backs, 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs, 1 linebacker. Obviously, 0 quarterbacks. They haven't picked a quarterback in the first round since Archie Manning. So is Shedeur Sanders that guy? Is Jackson Dart that guy this year at 9? I've already said I don't think Jackson Dart is at 9. I said I think if Shedeur Sanders is at 9, that's QB1 in this draft. To me, you take him. Cam Jordan's not buying it because just like you, just like many of the Saints fans out there, he's seen how this team rolls. And you said it the last time we talked about it. I believe it was Monday. If you had to bet money on it, you would bet the field over a quarterback because that's just how this team operates. And that is how this team operates. They've picked a lot of offensive linemen and defensive linemen. Have they hit on all of them? Not at all, but that's what they've leaned towards. So we'll see how much of a change Kellen Moore brings to that culture.
And look, just to echo that, I know the gambling odds, but as I said last pod, despite some excitement from my co-host here and also fan base, that felt like, okay, the first 3 teams are not picking him, so who's the next logical spot? Process of elimination as opposed to the Saints are high on Shedeur Sanders. I just haven't picked up on that. Yes, I know the need. Yes, I understand the buzz. And yes, I understand the fan base excitement, you being one of them, when it comes to just the excitement for Shedeur Sanders. But when it comes down to it, I just do not think the Saints are going to do it, at least not at 9. Maybe there's some kind of maneuvering, middle of the first round, later in the first round. I can certainly see that. But I don't see it at 9. There's also, like I said earlier, there's another layer to this when it comes to Cam Jordan saying what he had to say. I know we got about 2 minutes here, so we'll get out of here quick. You think a guy heading into his 15th year, potentially his last year, wants a rookie starting quarterback? I don't think so. And even if that quarterback they pick at 9 does not start, that means, in Cam's eyes, they're bypassing a player that could make an impact right away. You see, Cam, those thoughts, thinking about the present. The Saints have to think about the present and the future. So Cam's thoughts are interesting because I do think he reveals a lot what the organization thinks and how they act, because he's been a member of it for 15 years. But you also have to understand Cam's in a totally different space than the front office and the organization and the fan base. So just keep that in mind when you hear some of those thoughts as well.
And that's a very good point, because when it comes to Cam Jordan, while I don't agree that the Saints are a top-tier team when healthy, I fully believe that that's what he believes.
Exactly.
I fully believe that he views this as a team that was an injury or two away from potentially making the playoffs and making a Super Bowl run last year. So if you're Cam Jordan, I can see why he wants Ted McMillan. I can see why he wants Ashton Jeanty, because those are guys who you can plug into this offense right now, and they help from day one. Ashton Jeanty makes this offense so much more dynamic. Ted McMillan brings this offense something that they don't have on the roster right now in his skill set. So I can see why he wants them to add to a Derek Carr, who he clearly believes in, to take this team to the next level.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of veterans feel the same way.
Yeah.
I feel a lot of veterans feel the same way. So Cam Jordan provides some content for us today. Hope you enjoyed that. I did. I like that because it gave us a little bit of a sounding board of what some players are saying, and we can kind of react to that. All right, we got to get out of here. Looks like we
it's
do.
about
All right,
that time.
Andre Johnson Jr., I'm Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.